Hello, I'm Anthony Gartner, Manager of the Accessibility Hub at La Trobe University in Melbourne, Australia. Delighted to be here with you today. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the country that I'm participating in the ACEF online event today, whilst located in the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I recognise their ongoing connection to the land, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to all First Nations people who may be with us today. When we talk about numbers and stories in relation to equity programs, we come up with a couple of key metrics around access, retention, success, completion, and graduate outcomes. There are the numbers that we work with. And as an example of this is the Australian government's report on our equity outcomes for the identified groups. So we have students from non-English speaking background, students with disability, women in non-traditional areas of studies such as science, technology, engineering and maths, students from Indigenous backgrounds, and students from low socioeconomic areas. And we have data here from 2006 right through to 2019, which is the latest figures that have been published. And it gives us a sense of what's happening at a national level. And we can use these figures because they are provided by institution as well, so we can look down and compare our institution with other institutions and see how we're going. It's great for a big picture. But how do we monitor and evaluate? So we use this information to compare and contrast. We may also gather historical data, such as what we just saw. We may set aspirational targets. So in Australia, in 2010, the federal government set a target that 20% of all undergraduate students should be from low socioeconomic backgrounds. And we had a significant budget nationally to try and achieve this. And we're still going, and there has been a slow but steady increase in the number of students from low socioeconomic backgrounds in tertiary education. We may look at other in-country institutional data, so comparing our institution with another similar one. And we may look at international comparisons as well, such as the OECD rankings or the world rankings and the Times Higher Ed, for example. And so here's another example of historical data. This is the service that I manage, the Accessibility Hub. So we provide support to students with disability who are studying in undergraduate and postgraduate programs. And you'll see on this slide that I have data from 2016 right through to 2021. And I've broken it down by quarter. So you can see the number of students in each quarter who have approached my service for assistance. So for example, in 2021, first quarter, 219 students, second quarter, 279, third quarter, 232, and fourth quarter, only 63. But a total for the year of 793 students who came to our service requesting help. As you can see from previous years, 2016, 931, 1,108 in 2017, 940 in 2018, 1,036 in 2019, and then we had a significant drop in 2020 due to the pandemic. So a number of students with disability actually chose not to pursue tertiary studies. The concept was just too difficult for them. And we've had a bit of a pickup this year, back to 793. So this data tells us something about what's happening for our students with disability. And then we have another table here. This shows the total number of registered students with the hub. So in 2016, in 2016 we had 1,851 students. 2017, 2,184 students, 1,984 students in 2018. We jumped up quite a bit in 2019 to 2,316 students. 2020, again, when the pandemic hit, we dropped right back to 1,884 students. So nearly 500 students fewer were requiring our service in that year. And we've built it up a little bit to 2,058. So we've kind of returned to average. So that tells us something about students with disability as an equity category. They're still around, they're finding their way back into education, but it doesn't tell us the thick or rich data that Ed talked about on Wednesday night, because we want to know what happened to these students. What was their experience during the pandemic, and how successful have they been? So I wanted to give you an example of what I would call the rich or thick data. And this is a quote from a student who sent a letter to our service, to one of my team members. She said, "I'm so proud of myself and some of the Trobe staff who helped me as well. You are a wonderful and so kind woman who's staying to help me in this hard situation, thinking about my financial circumstances, supporting me and always offering me best service and possible care. I appreciate all your supports and never forget what you've done for me, which I call humanity. And by doing this, you're keeping your values at highest level, which makes you who you are. God bless you, and I hope that we can meet in person one day. Thank you so much for all your cares and assistance." So that gives us a little bit of an example of what's happening in the minds of one of our students, in this case, a student from a refugee or former refugee background. And then I have another example here of a student who received an equity grant this year. She said, "Thank you. The support of the emergency aid has made a huge difference to me and my daughters. To have the financial burden of basic day-to-day expenses removed for now is wonderful, strange feeling, and my mental health has improved majorly overnight. Today, my daughter was not coping well with homeschooling, and I could take the time to be with her and help her understand the strange COVID world we are all in at the moment. Supporting her emotionally is something that I haven't been able to do as well as I would like, as I've been so stressed about supporting my children since losing my job with lockdown and the embarrassment of reaching out for help through the food bank. Trying to homeschool myself and my children and keep our heads above water has taken a toll, and now thanks to your support, that has been lifted. Today is a good day. That heavy, stressful financial burden has gone for now, thanks to your incredibly generous support. Thank you to everyone that worked on setting up help for myself and the many others like me in this situation. You are wonderful. Please remember, when days get tough, that you have made a huge positive difference to people's lives. As mature-age single parents, it is easy to feel forgotten by our government, but I have never felt so seen and valued as I have done at the Trobe." Another lovely example of thick and rich data that tells us the value of an equity program has been to support our students with their most pressing concern, which was actually money. So I guess what that means in terms of equity programs is we really need to think about what we're doing. And remembering those three words, the possibilities, the practicalities, and the third one, the purposefulness of the programs that we deliver. And how do we measure success in these sorts of programs? The emails that I've written and that I've read to you rather give some sense of what I would call success. Now, whether those students graduated or not, I'm not sure. But what I do know is that they felt valued. And that's a pretty important component of an equity program. So we have to see what's working well and capitalize on that. Sometimes we can focus on what's not working well, which becomes a very problem-saturated story. We're looking at what are the problems and how do we fix the problems. Whereas we can also look at what are the successes and how we capitalize on those. And the emails that I've read are a couple of examples of successes. So we can gather that financial support is really important for students, particularly students from low socioeconomic backgrounds. We can gather that feeling valued and feeling a sense of belonging is critically important for students. And so these are some of the things that will inform the equity programs that we run. And I guess there's another question there is about how do we actually share good practice? So in Australia, we have a community of practice called the Equity Practitioners in Higher Education Network. They meet regularly. They have a committee that oversees that program for the whole country. And they have an email list server that provides a place for conversation and for the sharing of good practice. And I think that's really important, that if you have something that works well, we can either be in competition with other universities, or we can collaborate with other universities for the benefit of the equity category students that we work with. I very much favour the collaborative approach, because my position is that it's not about which students come to my university, it's about which students are successful in any university. And how do we take a big picture view, which is, for instance, in my case, how do I support all students living with disability nationally? How do we improve employment outcomes for those students at a national level, not just for my students, but for all 68,000 students that we have in the country who have disability. So I've got a little quote here. There was a report released a couple of years ago called Best Chances for All, and I've put a link on the slide, and it's also in the resources. So advancing Australia's future depends on all its people, whoever and wherever they are, being enabled to successfully engage in beneficial and lifelong learning. Now, I argue that that's not just for Australia, that's for any country. The ability for all people to engage in education is so important. And when they do, they contribute to a fair, democratic, prosperous and enterprising nation. Reconciliation with Indigenous Australians or Indigenous people in whichever country you're from, and cultural, civic and intellectual life. So we enable people to contribute. And this is achieved by an inclusive design system with multiple entry and exit points, proactive removal of barriers to participation, and tailored supports where needed. And we remain accountable through an integrated approach to measuring success at institutional and national levels to align performance with policy objectives. So I think what's key here in this Best Chances for All report is the idea that we are enabling people to participate and contribute to society. And we achieve this by inclusive systems and by aligning our practice with policy and making sure that everyone has access to education and the opportunity to succeed. As equity practitioners, this is our ability and also our obligation, I think, to really think about who could benefit from the programs that we offer. Who is there, who's forgotten, whose voice is unheard, whose stories are untold? How can we reach out to those students or potential students and embrace them and give them the chance of success? So I hope that has given you a little bit to think about in the process of being an equity practitioner. I've included here a couple of resources that I think may be of assistance to you, and I look forward to further conversation. Have a great day. Thank you.